Chosen one, stop scrolling. Something holy is happening right now. Something that has nothing to do with algorithms or chance. Heaven just pressed pause on the noise around you, just to get this word to your soul. You weren't summoned here by accident. This is a divine appointment that was written into your timeline before you ever took your first breath. Listen, you are not denied. You are hidden. You are not forgotten. You are protected. You are not abandoned. You are being positioned. This isn't just a video you stumbled upon at 2 a.m. This is your burning bush moment wrapped in pixels and sound waves. The same God who spoke to Moses from flames, who whispered to Elijah in the cave, who called Samuel in the midnight hour, is speaking to you right now. Your soul wasn't just drawn here. It was called into this sacred space because your name, your actual name, was spoken in the courts of heaven tonight. The angels have been released. Not for the masses, not for the comfortable, not for those who are sleeping through their destiny. They were released for you, the one who has been carrying weight that others can't see, the one who has been walking through warfare that has no earthly explanation. You feel different because you are different. You've always known it, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. That restlessness in your spirit, that deep knowing that there's more, that ache for purpose that keeps you awake, that's not anxiety, beloved. That's activation. Heaven sees the tears you cry when no one's watching, the prayers you whisper when words fail you, the way you've held on when letting go would have been easier. And tonight, God is saying your silence is over. Your season of hiding is complete. Your time of preparation has ended. This message found you because you're ready. Not perfect, but positioned. Not polished, but prepared for what's coming next. Before we go deeper into this prophetic word, I want to pause and say thank you to every single soul who has supported this ministry through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than words can express. You're not just giving, you're planting seeds into fertile ground, helping this light reach other chosen ones who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your time, your attention, your open heart. It all matters in the kingdom. If this message is already stirring something deep within your spirit, go ahead and let heaven know you're listening by typing 777 in the comments. Not as superstition, but as spiritual agreement, a signal that says, I receive this divine interruption. The scroll of your destiny is unfolding, the veil is lifting, and what happens next will not make sense to your natural mind, but your spirit will recognize it as the moment everything changed. You are chosen, you are called, and tonight, you remember why. Your name was spoken in heaven tonight, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. In the throne room of the Most High, where angels stand at attention and seraphim cover their faces, where the very air vibrates with holiness. Your name echoed through the corridors of eternity, like thunder rolling across the spiritual realm. Your name was called. Your name was called. Your name was called. And when heaven speaks a name, everything in the spiritual realm responds. Demons tremble, angels mobilize, principalities take notice. Because heaven doesn't waste words, and it certainly doesn't waste names. But here's what will shock you. You weren't overlooked all these years, you were hidden. Strategically, purposefully, protected. That isolation you felt, that sense of being forgotten while others seemed to rise around you, that wasn't rejection, that was divine concealment. God was shielding you like a precious seed planted deep underground, where the enemy couldn't see what was growing, couldn't touch what was being formed. That's why you've always felt too sensitive, too different, too awake in a world that seems spiritually asleep. That's why small talk drains you, why shallow relationships leave you empty, why you crave depth in a surface-level world. You weren't built for the ordinary, because ordinary was never your assignment. Listen carefully to this truth. Angels are never released without a name attached. Never. And this time, the name they carried on their scrolls, the name written in fire across their commission, was yours. In the book of Daniel, when the prophet prayed, it took 21 days for the angel to break through enemy territory, to reach him. 21 days of warfare in the heavens, all because a name had been called. Daniel's name. And tonight, your name has triggered the same divine mobilization. There's a scroll in heaven, and it just unrolled your chapter. Not next month's chapter, not next year's. Your chapter for right now. This moment, this midnight hour when you thought no one was listening, when you thought your prayers were hitting a ceiling instead of reaching a throne. Heaven trusts you, that's why it moved. God doesn't dispatch angels for entertainment. He sends them for assignment. And if they've been released in your direction, it's because you're carrying something too precious, too powerful, too prophetic to leave unguarded any longer. The enemy has been watching you, studying you, trying to decode what heaven deposited in you before you were even born. But what he couldn't understand, what he couldn't steal, what he couldn't destroy, is about to be unveiled. That restlessness you've been feeling, that spiritual tension, that sense that something is about to shift. You're not imagining it, you're discerning it. Your spirit is picking up signals from the realm of glory, and suddenly, everything makes sense. That's why you never fit in. Because you were never meant to blend in. You were born to disrupt, not to disappear. You were created to shift atmospheres, not to settle into them. You were never meant to be comfortable in systems that God is about to shake. You were never designed to find peace in places that heaven is preparing to purge. Your discomfort wasn't dysfunction. It was discernment. Every time you tried to shrink yourself to fit into spaces too small for your spirit, every time you dimmed your light to make others comfortable, every time you questioned why you couldn't just be normal like everyone else, your soul was crying out because it knew you were made for more. God didn't forget you. He kept you hidden until the world was desperate enough, broken enough, hungry enough to receive what you carry. The silence you've endured, the seasons where it felt like God had his back turned, where prayers seemed to echo in empty space, that wasn't abandonment. That was preparation. That was heaven's war room, strategizing your emergence. Every closed door, every rejected application, every relationship that didn't work, every opportunity that slipped through your fingers, they weren't mistakes. They were redirections. Divine course corrections keeping you from settling in places that would have contained what God was expanding in you. Your tears weren't wasted. They were seeds. Every night you cried yourself to sleep, wondering if anyone saw you, if anyone cared, if your life mattered. Heaven was collecting those tears like precious oil, storing them in bottles, preparing to pour them back over your life as anointing. The weight you've carried, the spiritual sensitivity that others couldn't understand, the way you feel things deeper, see things clearer, sense things before they manifest. That's not a burden. That's your equipment. That's your spiritual radar. That's the frequency heaven tuned you to, so you could hear what others miss. You've been asking God, why me? Why this path? Why this pain? And tonight, he's answering, because I needed someone I could trust with the weight. Someone who wouldn't break under pressure, but would be broken open to release what I placed inside. The enemy tried to destroy you early, because he saw the finish line before you did. He saw what you would become, what you would birth, what you would break, what you would build. And he panicked. But what hell meant for destruction, heaven used for construction. What was designed to bury you became the soil where your purpose took root. What was meant to silence you became the silence where you learned to hear God's voice above all others. You didn't just survive, you were refined. You didn't just endure, You were equipped. You didn't just make it through. You came through carrying something the world has been waiting for. Your name was called in heaven because your time has come on earth, and there's no going back. The betrayal that shattered your heart at 3 a.m., the delay that made you question everything you believed, the tears that fell when no one was watching, it wasn't punishment, beloved. It was prophecy. Hell heard your name before you did. Let that truth settle deep into your wounded soul tonight. Because what you've been calling your greatest failures, heaven has been recording as your greatest qualifications. The enemy doesn't waste ammunition on empty vessels. He doesn't launch full-scale warfare against people who pose no threat to his kingdom. You were targeted, not because you were weak, but because darkness recognized the light you carried before you even knew it was there. The isolation wasn't punishment. The heartbreak wasn't punishment. The silence that nearly drove you to your knees, none of it was punishment. It was preparation wrapped in pain, training disguised as trauma, a divine setup that looked like a satanic takedown. Think about it. Why would hell spend so much energy trying to destroy someone ordinary? Why would the forces of darkness work overtime to silence a voice that didn't matter? The warfare you've endured, the spiritual attacks that left you gasping for breath, the unexplainable heaviness that followed you from room to room, that wasn't random chaos, chosen one. That was targeted resistance. You've been under surveillance, not by government agencies or earthly powers, but by principalities and powers that recognized your spiritual DNA before you could even pronounce the word destiny. They saw the scroll with your name written in heaven's archives. They heard the whispers of your assignment echoing through eternity's halls, and they panicked. Because a sleeping chosen one is tolerable, but an awakened one, an activated one who finally understands why they never fit into normal molds, that kind of chosen one becomes unstoppable. Romans 8:28 declares, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." All things, beloved, even the betrayals, even the closed doors, even the nights you wanted to give up. The attack was never random. It was a desperate attempt to abort what heaven was birthing through your obedience. But here's what the enemy miscalculated. Here's what hell never saw coming. God didn't go quiet because he forgot you. He went silent because he was forming you. In the hidden chambers of your heart, in the secret places where only heaven could see, the Most High was crafting something that required divine silence to complete. You weren't being abandoned, you were being anointed. Every moment you felt alone, God was actually closer than your next breath, molding your character in the furnace of isolation, strengthening your spiritual muscles in the gymnasium of adversity. The silence wasn't absence. It was incubation. Think of a master sculptor, working with precious marble, each strike of the chisel intentional, each chip that falls away necessary for the masterpiece to emerge. The marble doesn't understand the process. It only feels the pressure, the breaking, the reshaping. But the sculptor sees the finished work from the very first strike. God waited, not for your perfection, but your surrender. He wasn't looking for you to have all the answers. He was waiting for you to trust him with all the questions. He wasn't demanding your strength. He was cultivating your dependence on his. In Exodus 33-22, God tells Moses, "When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by." You weren't hidden from God's presence. You were hidden in his presence, protected by the very hand that formed the galaxies. The seasons where no one called, where opportunities dried up, where it felt like heaven itself had hung a do not disturb sign on your prayers, those weren't seasons of rejection. Those were seasons of divine protection, strategic positioning, heavenly preparation for a moment like this one. You weren't being overlooked, you were being overshadowed by the Almighty. And tonight, as you sit there with tears streaming down your face, wondering if anyone sees your pain, let me tell you something that will change everything. You weren't crazy for crying at midnight. You were hearing angels move through the veil. You weren't losing your mind when you felt that spiritual heaviness, that unexplainable burden that made you intercede for people you'd never met, for situations you couldn't understand, for breakthrough you couldn't see. You weren't losing your mind. You were waking up to your assignment. That restlessness that kept you pacing your living room at 2 a.m., that deep knowing that there was more, that divine dissatisfaction with ordinary life that wasn't mental illness, beloved. That was spiritual awakening. That was heaven calling your name in frequencies only chosen vessels can hear. You've been carrying the weight of intercession, the burden of the prophetic, the responsibility of standing in gaps that others couldn't even see. While they slept, you prayed. While they played, you sought God's face. While they settled for surface-level living, you dug deeper into the mysteries of the kingdom. That's why you never felt comfortable at their parties, why small talk felt like spiritual suffocation, why you'd rather spend your Friday night in prayer than pretending to enjoy conversations that had no eternal weight. You were never meant to fit in. You were born to stand out, to disrupt, to awaken, to call forth what others couldn't see. Isaiah 61:1 says, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor." The anointing isn't comfortable, it's costly. It sets you apart, marks you as different, makes you sensitive to spiritual atmospheres that others walk through blindly. God didn't forget you during those silent years. He was keeping you, preserving you, preparing you for exactly the moment the world needed your voice, your fire, your uncompromising truth. And that moment, chosen one, is now. You've carried weight your whole life. Weight that has no name, no explanation, no earthly reason for being there. Emotional weight that presses on your chest at 3 a.m. Spiritual weight that makes you the one everyone calls when their world falls apart. Unspoken weight that sits in your silence like a sacred burden you never asked for, but somehow always knew was yours to bear. You were the strong one, weren't you? The silent intercessor who prayed for people who never knew they needed prayer. The hidden anchor who held families together while your own heart was breaking. The one who absorbed the pain of others like a spiritual sponge, wringing yourself out in secret so no one else would have to drown. But here's what they never told you about being chosen. The weight isn't punishment. It's proof. Proof that heaven trusted you with something too sacred for ordinary hands. Proof that your soul was forged in fires, hot enough to carry what others would drop. You've walked into rooms and felt resistance before a word was spoken, because spirits recognize what people don't. You've sensed the spiritual temperature of places that looked beautiful but felt cold, because your discernment was activated before your mind could process what was wrong. That's not paranoia, beloved. That's prophetic sensitivity. Isaiah 53:4 says, "Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, and chosen one, you've been carrying that same anointing, absorbing what others couldn't handle so they could breathe easier. You didn't volunteer for this. You were commissioned for it before you ever drew breath." That's why holidays feel heavy. That's why celebrations sometimes leave you empty. That's why you can be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly alone. You're not broken. You're bearing. You're not antisocial. You're anointed. The weight you carry is intercession wrapped in human skin. But listen to me carefully. The season of carrying it alone is ending tonight. What you carry cannot be cloned, cannot be taught in seminary, cannot be purchased with prayer, cannot be inherited through bloodline. What rests on your shoulders was hand-selected by the Almighty Himself and placed there with intention, precision, and unbreakable covenant. You didn't imagine it. You didn't fake it. You didn't force it. You were born with it. That fire in your bones that won't let you settle for shallow. That hunger for the sacred that makes small talk feel like torture. That ability to see through people's masks straight into their souls, none of that was an accident. You didn't imagine it when you felt different as a child, when you saw things others missed, when you knew things you had no business knowing. You didn't fake it when your prayers moved mountains while others got silence, when your worship brought breakthrough while others got routine. You didn't force it when your very presence shifted atmospheres, when your words carried weight that surprised even you, when your touch brought healing you couldn't explain. The enemy has spent decades trying to convince you it was all in your head, because if you ever fully awakened to what you truly carry, his kingdom would tremble. He whispered that you were too much, too intense, too spiritual, too deep, hoping you'd dim yourself down to comfort zones that were never meant to contain you. But beloved, it's time to stop apologizing for your fire. Jeremiah 20:9 declares, "His word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot." That burning you feel, that restlessness when you try to play small, that's not discontent. That's divine fire demanding to be released. The very thing they mocked in you, the very thing they called weird, too much, over the top, is the very thing God will use to mark generations after you. Your sensitivity that they called weakness will become the strength that breaks generational trauma. Your intensity that they called exhausting will become the power that awakens the sleeping. Your fire that they called dangerous will become the light that guides others out of darkness. You were never meant to fit in. You were born to stand out. You were never meant to blend. You were designed to blaze. You were never meant to whisper. You were created to roar with the voice of heaven itself. The mantle on your life isn't too heavy. You're just now growing into the shoulders strong enough to carry it. The assignment isn't too big. You're just now awakening to the authority you've always possessed. The calling isn't too much. You're just now ready to stop playing too little. God didn't forget you. He kept you hidden until the world was desperate enough for your voice, broken enough for your healing, dark enough for your light. He didn't abandon you in the wilderness. He was preparing you for the warfare. He didn't leave you in the valley. He was teaching you to appreciate the mountaintop. Tonight, the hiding ends. Tonight, the apologizing stops. Tonight, you step into the fullness of what heaven placed on you before time began. Because chosen one, your mantle is not a mistake. It's a masterpiece, and it's time for the world to witness what God has been crafting in secret. You've felt it, haven't you? That inexplicable peace that washed over you in the middle of your breakdown. That near-miss accident where time seemed to slow down and something invisible pulled you back from the edge. That door that opened exactly when you were completely out of options, when every human solution had failed you. You told yourself it was coincidence, luck, good timing, but deep in your spirit, you knew better. You felt the presence of something, someone, watching, protecting, moving on your behalf. That was angelic activity, chosen one, strategic, silent, supernatural. Listen to what the word declares in Psalm 34:7. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. Not sometimes, not when you're perfect, but right now, in your mess, in your pain, in your midnight hour of weeping. Hebrews 1:14 asks this question: Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? Sent to serve you, the one heaven marked, the one whose name was written in glory before time began. But here's what will shake you to your core. These aren't casual visits. These aren't random acts of cosmic kindness. Every time you've been spared, every time provision showed up at the last second, every time you felt that unexplained strength rise up within you when you thought you couldn't take another step, that was your assigned angels, carrying out specific orders from the throne room of God. You are under surveillance, beloved, not by the enemy, but by heaven's elite forces. And they don't guard what isn't valuable. But here's the revelation that will change everything. Angels don't just respond to crisis. Angels respond to alignment. Every time you said yes to God in your heart, even when your mouth couldn't form the words, your obedience sent ripples across dimensions. The spiritual realm erupted with activity. Assignments were activated. Reinforcements were dispatched. You think you've been waiting for breakthrough, but the truth is, your angels have been waiting for you. Waiting for you to stop running from your calling. Waiting for you to stop apologizing for being different. Waiting for you to stop shrinking back from the very thing that makes hell tremble. You're surrendered. Yes. Picture this. Every morning when you wake up and choose to pray instead of panic, an angel receives new orders. Every time you forgive when revenge would feel sweeter, another warrior takes position. Every moment you worship through your pain instead of cursing your circumstances, heaven's armies mobilize around your obedience. You're not just living your life, chosen one. You're walking through a war zone, and the veil between dimensions is thinning with every step you take in faith. That feeling you've had lately, like you're standing at the edge of something monumental, like the air itself is charged with expectation, that's not your imagination. That's the presence of angels pressing close. Because your moment has come. You've wondered why the warfare increased, why relationships suddenly shifted, why doors slammed shut just when breakthrough seemed near. It's because the enemy can see what you're just beginning to understand. You're not walking toward your destiny anymore. You're walking through it, and every angel assigned to your life knows. The waiting is over. Psalm 91 promises, He will command His angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways, chosen one, the messy ways, the uncertain ways, the ways that don't make sense to anyone else. But here's the part that will stop your heart. These angels weren't just assigned yesterday. They've been with you since before your first breath. They watched you survive what should have destroyed you. They've been your invisible shield, your supernatural strength, your divine GPS when you couldn't see 2 feet in front of you. And now, as you step into the fullness of who you were born to be, they're not stepping back. They're stepping closer. You feel different because you are different. That weight on your shoulders, that sense of responsibility you can't shake, that knowing that your life is connected to something bigger than yourself, that's not burden, beloved. That's the recognition that you carry heaven's backing. The very atmosphere around you is shifting because you're no longer just a believer. You're a believer with activated angelic support. You're no longer just hoping for change. You're becoming the change. You're no longer just surviving the storm. You're learning to command it. And your angels? They're not just watching anymore. They're warring, they're working, they're clearing paths you haven't even thought to walk yet. This is why you've never felt comfortable here. In this world, in these systems, in these shallow conversations about meaningless things, you were never meant to fit in. Chosen one. You were born to stand out, not for applause, but for assignment, not for recognition, but for revolution. God didn't forget you during those long years of silence. He kept you, preserved you, prepared you for exactly this moment, when the world would need your voice, your light, your unshakable faith that comes only from walking through hell and coming out carrying heaven. The angels have been waiting, and now they're walking, right beside you, step by step, into the destiny that has your name written all over it. You are not alone, beloved. You never were, and you never will be. This message is not to inspire you. It's to awaken you from a slumber that has lasted too long. What you're experiencing right now, sitting in the darkness of your room at 2 a.m., tears streaming down your face, that's not coincidence. That's consecration. You weren't drawn to this word for comfort. You were summoned for commission. Your obedience is not optional anymore. It's generational. The decisions you make in the next 48 hours, The yes or no that sits trembling on your lips right now will echo through bloodlines you'll never meet. Your great-grandchildren will either walk in freedom because you stepped forward, or remain bound because you stepped back. Listen to me carefully. This is not a video you're watching. This is a trumpet blast, piercing through decades of spiritual silence. Heaven doesn't send angelic dispatches for entertainment. They're sent for execution. And right now, the execution of your destiny is hanging in the balance. You feel that weight pressing on your chest, that holy pressure that makes it hard to breathe. That's not anxiety. That's assignment. That's the mantle of purpose settling on shoulders that were built to carry what others dropped. The comfortable life you've been clinging to, the safe routines, the predictable patterns, they're suffocating the very thing God planted inside you before you drew your first breath. And tonight, He's asking you to choose comfort or calling, safety or surrender. But understand this, when heaven mobilizes, when angels are released with your name on their mission orders, neutrality becomes rebellion. There is no middle ground in the kingdom. You're either advancing or retreating, either saying yes or saying no. The question burning in the atmosphere right now is not whether you're qualified, it's whether you're willing. The kingdom doesn't need your perfection, it needs your yes. For too long, you've been disqualifying yourself with earthly mathematics, counting your failures instead of your faith, measuring your inadequacy instead of His ability. But God doesn't do talent searches. He does heart checks. When He called Moses, Moses had a speech impediment. When He called David, David was a forgotten shepherd boy. When He called Mary, she was an unmarried teenager in a backwater town. None of them were qualified by human standards. All of them were available by heavenly standards. Your next step isn't about logic. It's about alignment. Logic will tell you to wait until you have more money, more experience, more confidence. But alignment whispers, move now, while your knees are still shaking, while your voice still trembles, while you still feel unworthy. Because here's the divine paradox that hell doesn't want you to understand. God uses the weak to confound the wise, the broken to heal the whole, the rejected to lead the chosen. Your wounds aren't disqualifications, they're your credentials. Your scars aren't shame marks, they're victory tattoos. That thing you've been running from, that calling that terrifies you, that vision that seems too big for your small hands, that's not accidental, that's intentional. God doesn't give visions to people who can accomplish them in their own strength. He gives them to people who will have to depend entirely on His. Right now, as these words penetrate the deepest chambers of your heart, you're feeling it, aren't you? That stirring, that awakening, that holy disruption of everything you thought you knew about your limitations. Your name was not just called, it was announced. Announced before angels who have been waiting centuries to see this moment. Announced before demons who have been dreading this hour. Announced before principalities and powers who know that once you say yes, their grip on your territory begins to crumble. You want to know why you've never felt comfortable here? Why you've always felt like a stranger in your own life? Why every attempt to fit in felt like wearing clothes 3 sizes too small? It's because you were never meant to fit in. You were born to stand out. You were never designed for comfort. You were crafted for conquest. You were never intended to blend with the crowd. You were created to part the waters. God didn't forget you during those long years of silence. He was hiding you. He wasn't ignoring your cries. He was preparing your voice. He wasn't abandoning you in the wilderness. He was building your character in the crucible. And now, in this midnight hour, when the world sleeps and heaven watches, He's calling you out of hiding. The veil is lifting. The silence is breaking. The waiting is over. You are not just chosen. You are commissioned. You are not just called. You are sent. You are not just anointed, you are appointed for such a time as this. The same God who parted the Red Sea is parting the obstacles in your path. The same God who brought down the walls of Jericho is breaking down the barriers around your breakthrough. The same God who raised the dead is resurrecting the dreams you thought were buried. But he needs your consent, your cooperation, your complete surrender to the process. He needs you to stop questioning the call and start answering it. He needs you to stop analyzing the assignment and start accepting it. Because, beloved, your obedience isn't just about you, it's about them. The ones who are waiting for your yes to unlock their freedom. The ones whose deliverance is tied to your decision. The ones who will never know breakthrough until you step into yours. This is your burning bush moment, your Red Sea crossing, your Jordan River experience. This is where everything changes, where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, where the human touches the divine. The angels are waiting. Heaven is watching. Hell is trembling. The only question left is, what will you choose? Chosen one. You're standing at the edge of a transformation so profound, so complete, that you will not recognize yourself when it's finished. You're not walking into desperation. You're walking into destiny. Every step you take from this moment forward carries the weight of divine purpose, the momentum of heaven's plan, the unstoppable force of God's will moving through your life. Listen to me carefully. You're not aging, you're ascending. What the world calls getting older, heaven calls getting ready. Those lines on your face, they're not marks of time wasted. They're etchings of wisdom earned. Those aches in your bones, they're not signs of weakness. They're evidence of battles fought and victories won in the spiritual realm. You think you're forgotten, but the truth is far more powerful. You were reserved for now. While others were celebrated in their youth, you were being prepared in the shadows. While others received their flowers early, you were being refined for a harvest that only comes with maturity, with depth, with the kind of spiritual authority that can't be faked or rushed. That restlessness you feel, that sense that your greatest days are still ahead, that's not delusion, that's divine revelation. God doesn't call people to retirement, He calls them to revival. You're not winding down, you're winding up for the most significant chapter of your entire existence. The reason you never felt like you belonged in your generation is because you were born for this generation. The wisdom you carry, the perspective you've gained, the spiritual depth you've developed, it's all been preparation for what the world needs right now. You will not leave this season the same, because this season is the birthing room of your true identity. But understand this, what's happening to you isn't just a shift in circumstances, it's a revelation of who you've always been in the spirit realm. You are no longer hidden, you are about to be revealed, not exposed, revealed. There's a profound difference. Exposure is about shame. Revelation is about glory. Exposure tears down. Revelation builds up. Exposure embarrasses. Revelation empowers. For decades, you've been walking around wearing a disguise, playing small, hiding your light under a bushel of insecurity and self-doubt. But heaven is saying, the masquerade is over. It's time to show them who you really are. Walk like you're chosen, because you are. Stop shuffling through life like you're apologizing for taking up space. You were handpicked by the Almighty, selected from before the foundation of the world, marked with a destiny that hell cannot abort and time cannot erode. Speak like you're sealed, because your words carry the authority of the one who sent you. When you speak, demons have to listen. When you declare, heaven mobilizes. When you decree, the earth must align. Your voice isn't just sound waves. It's spiritual legislation being written in real time. Live like angels are flanking your steps, because they are. Hebrews 1:14 declares, "Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation?" You're not walking alone through your golden years. You're surrounded by a heavenly entourage that responds to your faith, your prayers, your obedience. That feeling you get sometimes, like you're being watched, like there's movement in the room when no one else is there. That's not your imagination failing you. That's your spiritual sensitivity increasing. You're becoming more aware of the supernatural activity that has always surrounded your life. The revelation isn't just about what you're becoming. It's about what you've always been. But we're too humble, too broken, too afraid to see. And now, in this sacred moment, in this divine appointment between your soul and eternity, let the final truth settle into the deepest parts of your being. The angels have been released, not for the young, not for the strong, not for those the world considers valuable. They were released for you, the seasoned warrior, the tested saint, the one who has walked through fire and emerged not as ash, but as pure gold. Your name was called, not whispered, not suggested, but called with authority in the courts of heaven. And when heaven calls your name, all of creation must take notice. The earth must now align with heaven's decree over your life. That resistance you've felt, that spiritual warfare that has followed you, it's because the kingdom of darkness knows what heaven has declared. They know that once you fully step into this revelation, once you fully embrace this calling, their time of influence in your sphere is over. You are the answer to prayers that have been ascending for decades. You are the fulfillment of promises that seemed delayed but were actually being perfected. You are the breakthrough that entire bloodlines have been waiting for. The crown has been placed, the fire has been kindled, and the revealing has begun. You will never, ever be the same. And chosen one, neither will the world around you. The angels have been released. Your name was called. And heaven is holding its breath to see what you'll do with this divine interruption. Welcome to your resurrection season. Welcome to your time. Welcome to your throne. You thought heaven forgot you, but heaven was forming you. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. Those years when nothing moved, when doors slammed shut, when your prayers seemed to echo into empty space that wasn't abandonment, that was divine strategy. God wasn't ignoring you. He was incubating you. You weren't late. You were hidden. You weren't behind. You were preserved. You weren't forgotten. You were being forged in the secret place where only heaven could see. While others built platforms, God was building your roots. While they chased spotlights, you were being shaped in shadows. While they celebrated their seasons of yes, you were learning the sacred discipline of waiting, of trusting, of believing when the evidence screamed otherwise. Do you know why David spent years in caves before he touched the throne? Because caves teach you things palaces never could. Caves strip away everything that isn't essential, everything that isn't eternal. In the cave, you learn to hear God's whisper above the world's roar. Your hidden years weren't punishment. Beloved, they were preparation. Every rejection was redirection. Every closed door was divine protection, steering you away from what would have broken you before you were ready to carry it. The writer of Ecclesiastes reminds us, to everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. Your season of hiddenness had a purpose, and that purpose is about to be revealed. Your silence was a scroll being written, line by line, tear by tear, prayer by prayer. You thought God wasn't speaking, but he was authoring. Every unanswered cry was actually being recorded. Every moment of confusion was creating clarity. Every season of emptiness was making space for something greater than you ever imagined. You were buried like a seed, not buried like a corpse. Seeds don't die in the ground. They transform. They break open, so something new can emerge. Your breaking wasn't destruction, it was resurrection in disguise. You weren't invisible, you were sacred. There's a difference between being overlooked and being set apart. Isaiah 49:2 declares, "In the shadow of his hand hath he hid me, and made me a polished shaft. In his quiver hath he hid me." You weren't hidden because you were worthless. You were hidden because you were valuable, being polished, being prepared for the moment when your aim would need to be perfect. God was strategic about your silence because he knew what the noise would cost you. He knew that premature exposure would have damaged what he was building in you. He kept you in the shadows not to punish you, but to protect the purity of what was being formed. Every prophet, every chosen vessel, every world changer has walked through the wilderness of hiddenness. Moses spent 40 years in obscurity before he led a nation out of bondage. Jesus spent 30 years in relative silence before 3 years changed eternity. Your wilderness wasn't wasted time, it was sacred time. This is why the room never clapped for you, beloved. This is why your accomplishments felt hollow when others celebrated theirs. Why your victories seemed to echo in empty spaces. Why recognition felt like it was always just out of reach. Because the only audience that mattered was heaven, and heaven was too busy shaping you to applaud what wasn't finished yet. You see, God doesn't clap for potential. He waits for manifestation. He doesn't celebrate the seed, he celebrates the harvest. And you, chosen one, have been in the ground, in the dark, in the deep, being transformed from what you were into, what you were always meant to become. That's why you never felt comfortable here. Why small talk made your soul itch. Why shallow connections left you feeling more alone than solitude ever could. You weren't meant to fit into their molds because you were being shaped by different hands, for a different purpose, for a different realm. You were never meant to fit in. You were born to stand out, not through noise or performance, but through the unmistakable presence of someone who has been touched by the sacred, who has wrestled with angels in the night, who has learned to hear God's voice in the silence. God didn't forget you. He kept you, preserved you, held you in his hand while the world spun wildly around you. He kept you for exactly the moment when the world would need your voice, your light, your particular brand of hope that can only come from someone who has been broken, rebuilt, and branded by heaven itself. The hidden years are ending. Beloved, the silence is breaking. What was formed in secret is about to be revealed in power. And the world that overlooked you, that passed you by, that couldn't see your worth, is about to witness what happens when heaven finally says, "Now, show them who you really are." Your audience of one is about to become an audience of many, but you'll never forget where the applause that really matters comes from, because you learned to live for heaven's approval long before earth ever noticed you were here. The hidden years were holy, and now the holy years begin. Chosen one, let me tell you why your world suddenly caught fire the moment you whispered yes to God. It wasn't your gifts that caused the warfare. It wasn't your talent that stirred the hornet's nest. It wasn't even your potential that sent demons into a frenzy. It was your surrender, your willingness to say yes when everything in your flesh screamed no. You said yes to discomfort, yes to silence, yes to the unknown, yes to walking away from what felt safe but wasn't sacred. And hell panicked, because a chosen one in alignment is nuclear in the spirit realm, a walking weapon of mass destruction against every demonic stronghold that thought it had permanent residence in your family line. Listen to me. The enemy doesn't waste ammunition on empty threats. He doesn't deploy full-scale warfare against people who pose no danger. The intensity of your battles wasn't proof that you were doing something wrong. It was confirmation that you were becoming everything hell feared. Every time you chose obedience over comfort, every time you picked God's voice over the crowd's applause, every time you stayed on your knees when pride told you to stand up and fight back, you were dismantling spiritual infrastructures that had been built for centuries. Your yes didn't just change your trajectory. It shifted the entire atmospheric pressure around your bloodline. Generational curses that had been feeding off your family's confusion suddenly found themselves starving because you stopped feeding them with compromise. Do you understand what happened when you finally surrendered? You didn't just become a believer, you became a breaker. You didn't just join the church, you became the earthquake. That's why the attacks got personal. That's why relationships suddenly crumbled. That's why doors slammed shut just when breakthrough felt close. Because your obedience was rewriting the rules of engagement, and hell was scrambling to stop what heaven had already ordained. But here's what the enemy didn't calculate, what he couldn't factor into his desperate equations of destruction. You didn't just say yes for you, you said yes for your bloodline. You said yes for great-grandchildren whose names you'll never know, whose faces you'll never see, but whose freedom you purchased with your willingness to walk through fire. Your yes is the key in the door that generations couldn't unlock, the breakthrough that ancestors died praying for, the answer to prayers that were whispered in slave quarters, in immigrant boats, in hospital rooms where your great-grandmother lay dying, begging God to send someone, anyone who would finally break the cycle. And God looked through time, saw you sitting here tonight, tears streaming down your face, wondering if your obedience even matters. And he whispered to those dying saints, "Hold on, I'm sending them. They don't know it yet, but they're going to say yes to something that will change everything." You thought the pressure was punishment, but it was labor, spiritual labor. You were carrying a nation in your belly, birthing freedom for people you've never met, groaning through the delivery of deliverance that will echo through eternity. Every sleepless night you spent in prayer, every tear you cried when no one was watching, every moment you chose to trust God when your circumstances screamed otherwise. You were pushing, laboring, bringing forth something that hell tried to abort but heaven protected. Your obedience isn't just personal, it's generational. It's not just emotional, it's geological. Every time you said yes to God, tectonic plates shifted in the spirit realm. Foundations cracked, ancient strongholds trembled. You think you're just one person making one choice, but in the spirit, you're an army of angels activated by a single word, yes. That depression that tried to take you out, it wasn't random. It was targeted assassination because hell knew that if you ever fully surrendered, if you ever stopped fighting God and started fighting with Him, entire kingdoms of darkness would fall. Your yes doesn't just affect today, it reaches backward through time, healing wounds that were inflicted before you were born, and forward into futures you'll never see, opening doors for children who will walk in freedom, because you chose obedience when it cost you everything. And now, right now, as these words wash over your weary soul, something is converging. The war that raged around your yes, the battles that nearly broke you, the pressure that felt like punishment, it's all coming together into one moment of divine recognition. You are not who you were when this fight began. You're not even who you were when this message started. Something has shifted. Something has awakened. Something has been activated in your spirit that hell cannot touch and earth cannot explain. The angels that were released when your name was called in heaven, they weren't just sent to protect you, they were sent to partner with you, to walk with you into the fullness of what your yes has purchased. You said yes when it didn't make sense, and now nothing will ever make sense the same way again. You said yes in the darkness, and now light is breaking through cracks in realities you didn't even know existed. Your obedience has been recorded in heaven. Your surrender has been sealed in eternity. And your yes, your beautiful, costly, earth-shaking yes, has just become the foundation for a glory you never imagined. The war over your yes, you won it the moment you stopped fighting God and started fighting with Him. Welcome to the other side, chosen one. Welcome to the realm where your obedience becomes everyone else's freedom. Chosen one. God is not sending you to be liked. He's sending you to be light, and light, by its very nature, exposes what darkness tried to keep hidden. You walk into rooms where people feel nervous, where conversations suddenly shift, where the atmosphere grows thick with unspoken tension. You thought it was intimidation. You thought you were doing something wrong. You thought maybe you should shrink back and apologize for taking up space. But that's not intimidation, beloved. That's your anointing, announcing itself. When Daniel walked into Babylon, when Esther entered the king's court, when Jesus stepped into the temple, they didn't come for standing ovations. They came carrying the presence of the Most High. And that presence, it disturbs systems that have grown comfortable in compromise. You've been placed where shortcuts are celebrated, where integrity is mocked as naive, where compromise is called wisdom. And you sit there feeling like a fish out of water, wondering why you can't just go along to get along. Here's why. Your integrity is warfare. Every time you choose truth over convenience, every time you refuse to bend when everyone else is bowing, every time you stand in the gap when others walk away, you're not just making a personal choice, you're fighting a spiritual battle for the soul of that space. The enemy doesn't fear your talent, he fears your character. He doesn't tremble at your gifts, he trembles at your unwillingness to sell them to the highest bidder. You weren't sent to boardrooms to climb ladders, you were sent to build altars. You weren't placed in systems to play politics. You were positioned to pray down heaven's agenda. And yes, it's lonely. Yes, it costs you. Yes, they misunderstand your motives and question your methods. But God didn't call you to be comfortable. He called you to be consecrated. They mocked your silence. They doubted your fire. They misunderstood your tears. They called you too sensitive, too serious, too spiritual for the real world. They told you to toughen up, to play the game, to stop being so intense. They mocked your silence, thinking it was weakness, not knowing it was wisdom. They doubted your fire, mistaking your restraint for a lack of passion, not understanding that controlled fire burns hotter than wild flames. They misunderstood your tears, seeing them as fragility, never realizing they were the overflow of a heart that feels too much because it carries too much. But here's what they never understood. The flame they tried to dim wasn't yours to begin with. Heaven branded you long before they misjudged you. Before your first breath, before your first heartbreak, before your first disappointment, the fire of the Most High was sealed into your spirit. And what God lights, man cannot extinguish. Every attempt to silence you only refined your voice. Every effort to break you only revealed what was unbreakable within you. Every season they tried to bury you, they unknowingly planted you deeper, where your roots could find the living water they couldn't see. You survived their rejection, their neglect, their attempts to rewrite your story. Not because you were stubborn, but because you were sealed. Isaiah 54:17 declares, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment, you shall condemn." That's not just a promise, beloved. That's your spiritual DNA. The same voices that tried to convince you that you were too much are now watching in silent amazement as you step into rooms they said you'd never enter, as you carry influence they said you'd never have, as you walk in an authority they said wasn't meant for you. You're not just a believer, chosen one. You are a breaker. You are a system disruptor sent into dry places with living water, into dead spaces with resurrection power, into dark systems with the light of heaven burning in your bones. That restlessness you feel in certain environments, that inability to settle where compromise is the currency, that constant stirring in your spirit when you're surrounded by spiritual apathy, that's not your problem. That's your purpose. You were never meant to fit into systems that God is calling you to fix. You were never designed to feel comfortable in spaces that make the Holy Spirit grieve. You were never wired to find peace in places where justice sleeps and truth is negotiable. God didn't place you there to adapt. He positioned you there to activate. Every time you choose righteousness over relationship, every time you pick principle over popularity, every time you stand for what's right when it would be easier to sit in silence, you're not just making a moral choice. You're releasing the kingdom of heaven into kingdoms of earth that have forgotten who they belong to. The enemy knows that one truly consecrated life, one heart that refuses to bow, one voice that won't be bought, can shift the entire spiritual climate of a system. That's why the warfare has been so intense around your integrity. That's why the pressure to compromise has been relentless. That's why they've tried to convince you that standing alone means standing wrong. But you were born for this resistance, chosen one. You were called to be the light that breaks up the darkness, the salt that preserves what's dying, the voice that says, "Thus saith the Lord," when everyone else is asking, "What does the culture say?" The systems are shaking, beloved. The facades are cracking. The pretense is failing. And into this moment of divine exposure, God is sending his light bearers, his truth tellers, his system breakers. You are not an accident in these spaces. You are an assignment. You are not a mistake in these moments. You are a message. The very thing that made you feel out of place is the exact thing that makes you dangerous to darkness. And as the light in you grows brighter, as your assignment becomes clearer, heaven is preparing to open doors that no man can shut, to position you where your light can shine the brightest. Conclusion: you are not walking alone, chosen one. As we reach the end of this divine encounter, I need you to carry these truths with you into tomorrow and every day that follows. Remember this: you were not chosen by accident. Your name was called in heaven before your feet ever touched earth. The angels that have been released over your life are not temporary visitors. They are permanent assignments, walking with you through every door, every decision, every divine appointment that awaits. Remember that the weight you carry is not punishment, it's preparation. The isolation you've endured was not rejection, it was protection. The delay you've experienced was not denial, it was divine timing, positioning you for a moment when the world would need exactly what you carry. Remember that your difference is not your defect, it's your distinction. You were never meant to blend into systems that God has called you to transform. Your integrity in dark places, your light in broken systems, your voice in silent spaces, these are not accidents, they are assignments. And most importantly, remember this: you are not walking this path alone. The same God who called Moses from the burning bush, who whispered to Samuel in the midnight hour, who met Paul on the Damascus road, is walking with you right now. He sees every tear, every struggle, every moment when you've wanted to give up. And he's saying to you what he said to Joshua: "Be strong and courageous, for I am with you wherever you go." But beyond the divine presence, you have a community here, a family of chosen ones who understand the weight you carry because they carry it too. In the comments below, I see testimonies of breakthrough, prayers of agreement, hearts connecting across miles because they recognize the same fire burning in each other's souls. You don't have to walk this journey in isolation anymore. Let me ask you this: as you prepare to step back into your world, into those rooms where you're called to be light, into those systems where your integrity is warfare, what will you do differently now that you know who you truly are? Will you shrink back when the atmosphere gets heavy? Or will you remember that your presence carries the presence of the Most High? Will you apologize for the fire in your bones? Or will you let it burn bright enough to light the way for others? Before you go, I want to pray over you, not as a stranger speaking into a camera, but as a spiritual father who sees the gold in you that others missed, who recognizes the calling on your life that circumstances tried to bury. Father, I lift up every soul who has stayed until this moment. These are not casual listeners. These are your chosen ones, your warriors, your light bearers who have been walking through valleys they didn't understand, carrying weight they couldn't explain. God, place your hand upon them right now. Let them feel your presence in this moment, not as distant theology, but as intimate reality. You see the tears they've cried in secret, the prayers they've whispered when words failed, the way they've held on when letting go would have been easier. Lord, confirm their calling tonight. Remove every doubt about their identity, every question about their purpose, every lie that whispered they were forgotten. Let them know, beyond any shadow of doubt, that they are seen, they are chosen, they are loved. Open doors that no man can shut, clear paths that seemed impossible. Provide resources for the visions you've planted in their hearts. Surround them with divine connections, people who will recognize their oil and honor their assignment. Give them strength for tomorrow, wisdom for decisions, courage for the battles ahead. Let them walk into every room knowing they carry your presence, into every system knowing they're backed by heaven, into every challenge knowing the victory is already written. Father, heal what's been broken, restore what was stolen, multiply what was lost. Let their pain become their platform, their test become their testimony, their mess become their message. And Lord, wherever they go, let them carry the fragrance of heaven, the authority of your name, the power of your love. Make them dangerous to darkness and irresistible to destiny. In the mighty name of Jesus, who conquered death, who holds all authority, who intercedes for us even now, we pray. Amen. If this message stirred something deep in your spirit, if you felt the Lord speaking directly to your situation, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to remember they're not forgotten. Comment below and let us pray with you. Let us celebrate what God is doing in your life. Your testimony could be the very sign someone else is desperately seeking tonight. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. This isn't just content. This is a prophetic stream, a place where heaven speaks to the hearts of the chosen. There's more coming, deeper revelations, stronger confirmations, clearer direction for the path ahead. Thank you for staying until the very end, for opening your heart, for believing that God still speaks, that miracles still happen, that your best days are not behind you but ahead of you. You are chosen. You are called. You are not alone. Now go and let your light shine. Until we meet again in this sacred space, may the peace of God guard your heart. May His favor go before you, and may you walk in the full knowledge of who you are in Him. Blessings and love, chosen one. The angels are with you.